that's why Carolina's in Chapel Hill and USC's in California. And the university in this state always has been, always will be, Clemson. Print that, tweet that.
And I hope they come in undefeated. That's what I told you before the game. Our team believes. Our team believes. They got heart. We got greatness in us. They say we can't do it. What they say now?
Down go the champs. Auburn's 17-game win streak comes to an end.
We got greatness in us. So I told them, you got greatness in you, but you got to make a decision to be great. They made a decision to be great today. And I couldn't think of a better place to end the streak than Death Valley, South Carolina, baby.
And now it's time for TigerNet Talk, presented by Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty.
They got the coaches back, and they have each other.
Welcome back in, Tiger fans, to another edition of TigerNet Talk, episode number 186, broadcasting live here on Wednesday evenings at 9 p.m. for all of you during the summer months as we continue on looking forward to the opening weekend of college football just around the corner. It won't be long, and you're already starting to see preseason polls coming out, people talking about Clemson, Georgia, talking about the two Carolinas getting together, North Carolina and South Carolina. So, I mean, when you think about it, it'll go like this. You won't believe how fast this time goes, and I thank you so much for being here. As always, these are the ways you can take part in the program. Hashtag TN Talk on Twitter. That's T and the letter N and talk. Somebody told me one day they could not understand what I was saying. So it's all letters like TNT, the stuff that's dynamite. You know what I'm talking about. And then put talk at the end of it. So TN Talk, all one word with that hashtag. You can follow us on Twitter. We're at Clemson Sports. Clemson news, notes, information, and more. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Google Reader, though, going away, and that's one of the ways we've always fed that Twitter feed. There are going to be some changes. July the 1st, I believe, is when Google Reader goes down, and we're going to have to make some significant changes to continue to keep those updates coming to you all the time. There were some people that said, hey, how do you manage to tweet at 3 a.m. some breaking news? Well, we kind of did that. We aggregated that news for you. I hope you enjoy following us. We tried to slim it down so it doesn't put out quite as much stuff. It was really filling up some people's Twitter feeds, but we try to bring you that information even when we sleep if there's something new going on and you're out and about. Maybe you work the second or third shift. We want you to be not only invested in our program and invested in our Twitter feed, but knowing exactly what's going on over at Clemson. We got a number of people with us already in the chat room. That's the place to be. If you're watching the show on ClemsonSportsTalk.com or maybe on TigerNet.com, come on in. As I always say, the water's fine. They'll treat you great in here. And there couldn't be a more hospitable group than those of you who come each and every week to the live program. And I have to thank you all so much for what you've done. If you follow the programs, TigerNet Talk and Clemson Hotline, certainly you know we put our heart and soul into this and trying to deliver a great program for you each and every week. And I know many of you saw the news that came across the press release from 560 AM, the team in Columbia. That's Clear Channel Radio. For those of you that do not know, Clear Channel Media there in Columbia, we have actually secured a deal that's going to bring our programming, and we're going to call the show Clemson Sports Talk to you 5 nights a week from 6 to 8 p.m. I'm looking forward to kicking that off in July. Obviously, we're busy as can be right now gathering our sponsors, and I know that so many of you who live in and around the Columbia area, you know there's a gap when you talk about Clemson sports in this town, and it's not to say that Clemson is not mentioned, but I can remember many times living in Clemson and listening to WCCP all the time, and sometimes you want a little bit of a different flavor. Sometimes you want something else, a little different angle, and I think it's something special that we can bring, and we certainly have a tremendous amount of alumni in the area. I hope that you'll spread the word, whether that's through social media, through your Facebook page. Let people know we're coming. Let people know we're going to be kicking it off. Of course, that is going to be July the 15th, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The Braves are going to kind of, if you read the press release carefully, the Braves are going to kind of interfere with us a little bit, but we'll always be on iHeartRadio. So you'll be able to catch the show on iHeartRadio, and that's going to be an amazing thing because then no matter where you live, a lot of you podcast listeners of the show, a lot of you folks who partake in the live chat room, you maybe not live in and around Clemson or Columbia or Charleston. Many of you are far off, and that's kind of what's always driven this thing is the listeners who aren't in and around and can't get to Clemson sports. Now, the question has been posed on TigerNet, will there still be a podcast edition of that show that comes from T. Boone Pickens on TigerNet? I'm not sure how that will work with the guys over at Clear Channel. I'll get that ironed out. Whether the daily show gets put up in podcast, that's a possibility. Perhaps. I can't say for sure. I can tell you this program will continue on. Now, the Clemson Hotline program that you probably used to listen to on Sunday nights, that's going to be absorbed by TigerNet Talk. We're going to merge those just a little bit. TigerNet Talk will move to Sundays, and I want to make that more about you and less about me. I mean, obviously, the show on 560 AM, The Team in Columbia, will be a show that will involve a lot more calls probably than we get currently. But as you all know, our phone lines are always open here, 803-450-0086. You can give us a call if you'd like and take part in this program. And if you missed the live version of the show, there's always the voicemail feature you can leave on the phone lines. That's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or on our website, we've got the leave voicemail feature there as well, and you can see some of the new banners we've put up. We're really trying to not only bring a new show to 560 of The Team, but really expand on the social media aspect of radio. I know I had some people on TigerNet asking about the chat room. We're going to do everything we can to keep that show as traditional to what we've done here as possible. Because, look, we can talk about where we started back in 2004 with the 17 minutes of TigerNet Talk that you can find on archive.org if you want a good laugh, that I was doing with a headset, a USB headset I've got in my closet, and one computer, and going back and doing the post-production of that. But this show would never have gotten to where we are in this opportunity with Clear Channel Media if it weren't for you guys. And I don't want to change a whole lot. I want it to be Clemson Sports Talk, and that's going to be the name. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. And I hope you'll tune in and spread the word. Again, I'm humbled, to be honest with you. I am more humbled about this than I've been about anything in my career, because when I started it, I guess I had in some way in the back of my head the possibility of this goal being out there, this dream of would one day somebody recognize the job that I'm doing. And people in the chat room, you know, I would consistently see some of you say, hey, you know what, WCCP needs a show like this. This station needs to be on a radio feed somewhere. We need to be able to get it out there on terrestrial radio. And now, with this opportunity, it's just huge. So, again, I truly am humbled. Speaking of humbled, how about what happened just a couple of hours after we went on a mini rant? I wouldn't say it was a tremendous rant, but about the lack of recognition for Danny Ford in the Ring of Honor this past Wednesday. We were going off about Danny. I said it didn't need to be done tomorrow, next week. It needed to be done now. And somebody tweeted to me on Twitter. He said, I guess you had to wait. For some reason, it's not showing up anymore. But they said, I guess you had to wait 2 days for that to happen. And 2 days after that show came out, I'm by no means a prophet, but it definitely was welcome news for not only myself, but obviously Clemson Tiger Nation, to hear the news that Danny Ford would be put into the Ring of Honor. And I don't know if they'll take his name down from under the 1981 National Championship team. At this point, that seems like something that I would do if I were in charge of the whole operation. Some may say, no, you need to leave it up so it'll remind people in 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now that Danny Ford was actually the coach of that national championship team, and that's part of the reason that he's up there in the Ring of Honor. But clearly, this was the right move to make, and for many people, the time frame that had gone on since Danny Ford's departure from Clemson, whether you agreed with it at the time, which many Clemson Tiger fans did not, whether you're one of those people that say, you know what, we weren't playing by the rules, it wasn't exactly the most, I would say, I hate to say it wasn't a great time in Clemson history, because obviously the 80s were a fantastic time, but it was probably the deepest scar Clemson has ever had when you talk about allegations, sanctions, whether it was the ACC piling on a little bit to Clemson. Certainly some of the people who spearheaded all of that to the national championship run You start with Danny Ford and just his belief at 33 years old. That is one of the most impressive things of all. That is one of the absolute most impressive things at all, is that Danny Ford at 33 years of age was composed enough to lead this Clemson ball club not only to the national championship, but to win the thing against Tom Osborne, who had still up until that point been a major player in college football at Nebraska and would go on to do many, many more great things at Nebraska, much longer than Danny Ford would remain at Clemson. But certainly well-deserved for him. Coach Wilhelm, also former Clemson men's baseball coach, inducted into the Ring of Honor. Obviously, for Wilhelm, it's a bittersweet thing, I think, for his family to some degree, because he's not here. He's not alive to be able to appreciate it. But certainly, I think we all feel like, he's looking down and realizing that he is being recognized. And that was the one thing that scared me so much about Danny Ford. Yeah, and I'm not saying that Danny Ford is getting old, but he's certainly not a spring chicken anymore. And you can't, in my mind, when you've got a legend, and really, truly, at this point, he's the face of this program when it comes to the history and the tradition. Look, long gone are the days of Frank Howard. When I was in college, Frank Howard passed away, and up until then, and then you had Banks McFadden who passed away, and those were kind of the faces. And then you have Jim Phillips passing away. And so Danny Ford, really, for me, when I think Clemson football, outside of all the traditions and the histories, and when I think Clemson sports in general, and I think you could clearly lump him in over anything that's happened in baseball, anything that's happened in basketball, golf, obviously what Coach Ibrahim was able to do with the soccer program, winning 2 national championships in 84 and 87, that's big, but it's still soccer. And some of you will say, well, hold up now. Soccer is the world sport. But here in America, here in the South, in the ACC and SEC territory, clearly the icon and the legend that remains at Clemson is Danny Ford, and that recognition was so deserved. And I was excited when he got into the Hall of Fame. It was good news when we heard about this new bust of his head that was going to go into the West Zone. But now finally, that Block C cap, that I'm assuming it's going to be a Block C cap. Some people might say, should it be a bag of chewing tobacco or a piece of grass? But I'm assuming they're going to go with the Block C hat, based on, of course, Frank Howard's hat. And even Jim Phillips. Jim Phillips being recognized by naming the booth after him, and that's good. I still would like to see Jim in the Ring of Honor. I'll tell you why after these messages. Stay with us. G-Dog General Dentistry at Oak Grove is located on Highway 1 near the Barnyard Flea Market. Modern, relaxing dentistry with TVs and headphones in every room, nitrous and even oral sedation. Digital diagnostic x-rays for better quality and 85% less radiation exposure. And check out their new Clemson Patient Special. Mention that you heard about G-Dog here on the Clemson Sports Talk programs and receive an extra 5% off all services. If you don't have a regular dentist, go see my dentist, Dr. Rick Jackson at G-Dog. That's General Dentistry at Oak Grove. A winning team requires having great team members. If you're a landowner interested in selling timber or are considering buying or selling land, call the winning team of Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty, LLC today. Put the knowledge and skills of professional licensed foresters and realtors to work for your team. To learn more about services offered by Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty, LLC, visit www.crosscreektimber.com and easily follow the link to real estate or reach them by phone 864-517-3620 or 864-517-3621. Clemson Sports Talk fans, let us help you. With rates starting as low as $100 a month, you can advertise with us through July 2013. We are currently seeking additional advertisers and would love to help you spread the word about your business. Email us clemson81@gmail.com for additional information. Sponsors will receive an ad during the show and a link and logo in the weekly show notes on TigerNet and on the front page of ClemsonSportsTalk.com. Take your business to the Clemson fans around the world with us, ClemsonSportsTalk.com.
The 1988 season was a great year for the Clemson Tigers, finishing 10-2 with a win over Oklahoma in the Citrus Bowl. But it was a better year for Clemson fans. That season, Tigertown Graphics became your source for custom tees, promotional items, and embroidery. Conveniently located in the heart of downtown Clemson, their retail store proudly displays Clemson shirts that are designed and printed directly on site. Whether you're looking for the latest Clemson t-shirts or ordering products for your school, organization, or business, Tigertown Graphics can help with all of your t-shirt needs. Find them online at www.tigertowngraphics.com. A Clemson tradition since 1988.
On Saturday morning, I don't sleep late. I eat an early breakfast and I head out for the gate. I gotta get there early to watch the Tigers play. The dogs are in town, we'll blow them away. I've got my orange t-shirt, got my orange hat, even orange underwear. What you think of that? I'm an orange fan.
This cassette tape was playing in my car every time my father took me on the trip up to Clemson to check out the Clemson Tigers back during Danny Ford's days. I'm not sure exactly what year. Well, I guess that record came out in 1981, Tiger Fever, Ode to the Paws and Claws. But the cassette that we had, I guess we must have picked that up around 1984 or so, and I can remember being in Death Valley for the tie ball game against South Carolina. So many great memories of my childhood going up to Clemson and spending time there. Just always a lifelong Clemson Tiger fan. I mean, from the get-go. And Danny Ford certainly deserving. 96, 29, and 4 in 11 seasons with the Clemson Tigers. A fantastic record. Those of you who will, many people, there are still some out there. There's still some out there who are a little bit bitter about the way some things went on with the NCAA, and certainly everybody's still angry about the ACC adding on some extra sanctions. I mean, the Clemson fans, I don't think they'll ever get over that, the ACC adding an additional year of probation to the Clemson Tiger football team. That was pretty much, you talk about being railroaded. That's not right. I mean, today, you see in today's the modern era of college football, you see all these teams going out and breaking rules, and they sanction themselves, they discipline themselves, and then the NCAA goes, oh, well, that's okay, good, that you did enough. Clemson accepted the penalties, and then the ACC said, whoa, we don't think the NCAA did enough to punish Clemson. I think part of that was because Clemson was pretty much routinely beating everybody in the Atlantic Coast Conference at that time like a drum prior to FSU joining there in 1992. A couple of great comments that I saw in the chat room. Clemson Keith says, I think we'll look back on the years from now and truly appreciate the job that Dabo and company have done as well. I tell you, I think the argument can clearly be made at this point, the way Dabo Swinney has put this program back on the map, has put this program in the conversation at the beginning of the season for the opportunity to play for the national championship if the chips fall your way. That's all Clemson fans really ever wanted, even with Tommy Bowden. But much like back in 2008, when you go into this opening game, and we kind of focused on this last season as well, you had the opening game against Auburn over in Atlanta, very reminiscent, maybe the expectations for Clemson, not what they were going into that 2008 season, the final half year that Tommy Bowden would coach at Clemson, but certainly the expectations this year very high with a Georgia team that's coming to Death Valley with a very, very vaunted offense, rushing attack especially, and a very proven quarterback in Aaron Murray. Questionable on defense, maybe a little bit like Clemson. I think that'll be the big thing. Which defense holds up the best throughout the entire 4 quarters? Can Clemson's quick pace get to them? But you look at that and you think about, this Clemson team now compared to that team in 2008, and the expectations, they haven't been higher. And part of that is the recruiting job that Dabo Swinney has done, even with some of the key misses that have happened. It seems like this train continues to roll. And there are going to be those detractors out there that will say, you know what, this isn't a national championship team. And I want to go back to what I prefaced this whole thing by saying. You have to have a little luck. Very few teams are going to win the national championship by not having the ball bounce their way. Alabama last season loses to Texas A&M but has the ball bounce their way in some other ball games to open things up for them to get back into the mix. That's fortune. That they may have been the best team in America. I don't know if many people would argue that they're not going to be the best team in America this year. But Nick Saban knows it. Dabo Swinney knows it. Steve Spurrier knows it. Les Miles certainly knows it. You have to have a little luck to win the national championship. And it's easy to sit back every once in a while and pound your chest a little bit and look back to the victory against LSU 25-24. But I also think that you have to look at that with a little bit of bated breath in that 4th and 16 conversion. If that doesn't go your way, if Taj Boyd doesn't hook up with DeAndre Hopkins on 4th and 16, you have a little bit of a different feel at this point. And it's okay to recognize that. You don't have that feeling because you won the game. We don't have that feeling because we won the game. And it's perfectly fine, but a little luck is going to be what it takes to not only play for the national championship, but ultimately to win it. And once you get a little bit further, once we get into this playoff format next season, where 4 teams are in the mix, you're going to have a little luck in the final couple of games, a turnover here. That'll be the difference. You might can err just a little bit more. You might can make a couple of mistakes in the regular season and still work your way into that playoff. But in those final games, you got to have a little luck. Tommy in the chat room says it best. 4th and 16, awesome moment. You're right. When we look back on it, not that the game against LSU was for a national championship, but for Clemson to beat Auburn in the opening game, not a good Auburn team. At the time, we weren't sure. Then to lose to South Carolina and come back with a little redemption against an SEC team like LSU, who is so respected nationally. They are a tremendous ball club. And Les Miles takes a lot of heat for being the Mad Hatter. Even that final drive they had against Clemson, throwing the ball twice, giving us the opportunity to get the ball back without using timeouts. But he has built a solid program. As solid as I think many of you would easily agree with me is Alabama. They're neck and neck with Alabama. Tommy also says, talking about Danny Ford, he put Clemson on the freaking map. Maybe SEC style, but he did it. It was a great decision. I'll tell you what was not a great decision. Did you see this guy on Skywire Live or whatever it was trying to walk across the Grand Canyon?
Holy crap!
That's pretty much what I was thinking the entire time. They would show this camera angle from like a helicopter. First of all, if I'm walking a tightrope or a wire or whatever across the Grand Canyon and I'm 1,500 feet up, the last thing I want is anything in the air causing a little turbulence nearby. This guy was ridiculous. I can't remember his name. His grandfather was a tightrope walker. His dad, it's one of those things where for some reason he didn't decide at some point, I think I should be an accountant. That seems safer. Everybody was watching. Yeah, Keith says, what happens if he falls? Apparently they had a 7-second delay, Keith. If he fell, they were just going to cut. And now back to Wild Animal Kingdom or whatever it should have been on. That was crazy. He made it, by the way. My hands were sweating. My palms were sweating. That was an absolute disaster. I even saw somebody on Facebook post prayers for whatever his name was and his family. And in this modern age of DVR, I thought I was a little bit behind. I thought the guy had died. So then for about the next 3 minutes, I'm waiting for the fall. She was just praying that she hoped that he made it. Thank you for being here with us again on another edition of TigerNet Talk. Hashtag TN Talk on Twitter. You can tweet to us. We're at Clemson Sports. News, notes, information, and more 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We've got your Clemson sports coverage scattered, smothered, and most importantly covered. The Waffle House, I like to say, of Clemson sports. Email us, clemson81@gmail.com, and phone lines are open, 803 450-0086. And a lot of the information you need is right here below us. Well, it wasn't just Danny Ford who made headlines and Bill Wilhelm. We mentioned it. We had Jim Phillips' son Jeff on the program not that long ago. Had a great interview with Jeff. If you hadn't had a chance to hear it, go back in the archives on ClemsonSportsTalk.com and find it, because it really was nice to talk with him about his father, his dad's legacy, listening to some of those great calls as well. His father also, coincidentally, was inducted into the South Carolina Athletic Hall of Fame this year along with Danny Ford. But the home radio booth at Clemson's Memorial Stadium is going to be named after Jim Phillips. Now, of course, the press box is named after Bob Bradley, Clemson's longtime SID. But certainly Jim Phillips, this is a great honor for his family, the voice of the Clemson Tigers. I would still like to see him outside on the Ring of Honor, and here's why. For 35 years, from 1968 to 2003, and many of those years were in a time where Clemson football wasn't on TV every weekend, where you couldn't tune into, say, an ESPN3 if the game was being played at Durham. He was the voice for so many of you, whether you were laying in bed at night listening to a late Clemson ball game or perhaps riding in the road for a family trip. It was the only way you could pick the games up. The guys like that, and this is no disrespect to a man like Pete Yanity. It's no disrespect to any modern guy who's making these calls on the radio. But it was a different era. A completely... Look at it today. Most of you have probably watched every game that you weren't able to attend on television. And 9 times out of 10, you don't know who the two broadcasters are that you're listening to. Now, if you get the ESPN primetime game and you get Brent Musburger and Kirk Herbstreit, you know. But other than that, a lot of times you probably don't even know who you have calling the game. The reason Brent Musburger is Brent Musburger is partially because he was still in the TV business doing the biggest games of the week when everything else was on radio. So he was the guy. If Brent was coming to town, if Brent was going to be at the SO Club, if Brent was coming to Tiger Town, it was a big game. National media was covering it. Everybody was watching it. And it's made such a huge change in the way ESPN covers things now, ABC, whether you pick it up online. And that's my thought process behind it. 401 Clemson football games broadcast. And I don't know if Pete Yanity will surpass that in his career, if he will do more games there. Pete, of course, does Clemson basketball as well. A lot of schools, you don't even have that anymore. You don't have the guy who does football doing both. So Pete Yanity is kind of a throwback in that regard. But for me, Jim Phillips will always be, for you, he will always be the voice. And even with his name on the radio booth, much like Bob Bradley, I don't see a problem with putting him out there. And if the argument is, well, he doesn't have his 4-year degree, you know, his son talked about that. His son, Jeff, came on the show and said, hey, you know what? It was a different time. My dad got into the radio business, and that's the way it went. Look, if you're in the radio business and you're announcing for Clemson and you didn't have your 4-year college degree, I don't think you were probably going to go back. And I'm going to go back and pick it up. And I'm going to go back to something I said on that show and something that would be the right thing to do. They need to honor him with a degree in broadcasting from Clemson University. And as I'm aware, there is not a broadcasting journalism department to even give him one. Make it right. This man, Jim Phillips, deserves it because he carried us and he lived those moments, the greatest moments. If you take his voice away and just watch the videos, they don't have the same feel. And that feeling came because of the job that Jim Phillips did. Buckner Jams, Willie Underwood, all of those great calls. Treadwell's kick against Georgia, one of the greats. TigerNet Talk presented by Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty rolls on right after these messages.
We'll party like it's 1981.
Do you suffer from a chronic case of the woohoo during football games? Do your Saturdays sound something a bit like this? Well, TigerNet Talk is out to fix that. If we can band together, we can change this reoccurring issue. With a simple, Go Tigers, Go Tigers Go, you can make a difference. Ban the woohoo. Do yourself a favor. And as always, Go Tigers. A winning team requires having great team members. If you're a landowner interested in selling timber or are considering buying or selling land, call the winning team of Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty, LLC today. Put the knowledge and skills of professional, licensed foresters and realtors to work for your team. To learn more about the forestry and real estate services offered by Cross Creek Timber, call 864-517-3620 and Cross Creek Realty, LLC at 864-517-3621. Or visit www.crosscreektimber.com and easily follow the link to real estate. G-Dog General Dentistry at Oak Grove is located on Highway 1 near the Barnyard Flea Market. Modern, relaxing dentistry with TVs and headphones in every room, nitrous and even oral sedation. Digital diagnostic x-rays for better quality and 85% less radiation exposure. And check out their new Clemson Patient Special. Mention that you heard about G-Dog here on the Clemson Sports Talk programs and receive an extra 5% off all services. If you don't have a regular dentist, go see my dentist, Dr. Rick Jackson at G-Dog. That's General Dentistry at Oak Grove.
There's something about looking and feeling classy that everyone enjoys. Check out Edisto Outdoors, an apparel brand inspired by our southern animals and environment. These shirts feature soft touch prints that will keep you looking your best in all types of weather. Look for Edisto Outdoors coming soon to many fine retailers across the state, or visit www.edistooutdoors.com. Technical, comfortable, livable.
Blake Austin of South Carolina Farm Bureau is an insurance agent you can count on to meet all your needs. Home, auto, health, life, you name it, Blake's got you covered, and he can save you on your yearly rates. Call him now for a free quote, 803-259-5008. That's 803-259-5008. Or just go to ClemsonSportsTalk.com and click on the Farm Bureau logo to be connected to Blake. Do like I do and work with the best agent around, and you can tweet that.
Coach Ford, I wrote this song for you. I'm singing from my heart. There's something special in your style. I've known it from the start. Oh, listen up, we won't give up. We'll soon be number one. We'll be grinning from ear to ear when the football season.
Welcome back in to TigerNet Talk, episode number 186. Thank you so much for being here. I see Tommy in the chat room asking about when the show's going to air. Well, Tommy, we had a little bit of talk earlier in the show talking about how things are changing around here just a little bit. I don't know if you read the press release or not, but we actually have a 2-hour daily show coming to 560 AM The Team in Columbia, South Carolina. That will also be available on iHeartRadio. It starts July the 15th. We'll be on from 6 to 8 in the evenings, and we'd love to have you on that ride with us each and every day, whether you're in your car, whether you're at your house, however it takes. If you're in the area to pick us up on the radio, please do tune in. 560 AM The Team in Columbia, the only Clemson show in the belly of the beast, if you will. So I'm looking forward to it, and I'm certainly going to need my Clemson supporters out there to help me out along the way. But as far as this show goes, here's the deal. Here's what we're planning to do. I did mention that we're going to move the show eventually to Sundays, and what I think I'm going to do is actually go ahead and do that right now. Just go ahead and make that move to Sundays so that the weeks are a little bit more free. I've got a ton of stuff going on over the next several weeks, as you can imagine, out and about, pounding the pavement, going door to door, trying to find and garner sponsors for the program as we kind of build this thing in the Columbia area. So I'm constantly out and about, and just to be able to kind of settle down on the weekends and pull that off. So what I am anticipating happening is there will not be a show next Wednesday night. Just go ahead and have that whole week. I think that's the 4th of July anyway, that's the 3rd of July, so there's no reason to even do that because so many of you will be out with family and friends, and I don't blame you. Celebrate America, celebrate freedom, celebrate the opportunity that you have, and be thankful for what the soldiers do to protect us and give us all the opportunities that we have. And, I'm not wearing a hat, but I certainly take my hat off to not only the soldiers, their families, the wives, the children, the sacrifices they make. And I'm not just talking about the active members, the reservists, everybody, former family members of mine, anybody that's had to stand a post out there for the United States of America and defend our freedom. We certainly thank you for that. So we're going to take off next week, obviously, because of the 4th of July. And so the 7th of July, that'll be the day that we move this show to. So starting on the 7th of July, you can expect to see TigerNet Talk on Sunday nights. Now, part of the reason we're doing that, obviously, is because on the 15th of July, just a week later, we'll be doing a show from 6 to 8. And then doing another show from 9 to 10 is a little bit ridiculous. So we're going to move that. We'll probably take some time off during the summer with this program because of the changes that we're having. But I do hope that you'll join us for Clemson Sports Talk. And that's the name of the show. The website as well. But Clemson Sports Talk, 560 a.m., The Team in Columbia. Dustin in the chat room talking about Danny Ford says the rant we led here and on TigerNet and the emails I sent to the athletic department with everyone else must have worked. I'm with you, Dustin. I mean, it was pretty amazing to me how we went from, can we kind of have a conversation about this?
I've been wanting to talk to you about something.
To this is getting done. I mean, almost immediately. It was pretty amazing because we talked about how Chairman of the Board David Wilkins had said there's a process that needs to be gone through in this interview that he had with the Greenville News. So just for it to turn around that fast, apparently the process must have already happened. Tommy also, speaking of Jim Phillips, says he remembers in the 70s listening to Jim Phillips while he was out at his uncle's and cousin's house chopping wood for the winter for the grandparents. They also ate Hardee's hot dogs at every break every Saturday. Those were the days. You can remember, you'd have the old radio sitting out to the side. If you're doing some yard work, you might walk around the back of the house. You couldn't hear the game. And you'd come back and say, well, what happened? Who scored? And I'm sure there were many of you who really hunkered down and sat right there by the stereo for hours on end. But back then it was a little bit more relaxed atmosphere. Message boards, chat rooms, Twitter, Facebook didn't kind of rule things. It was a little bit more of a laid-back time for sure. And obviously it was so important to so many of you to hear that voice, and such a familiar voice. Matter of fact, I can remember going through the dials, and you'd hear the great Larry Munson over at Georgia calling a game, and it was them versus us, and just how that sounded, and that old school radio style that you don't see. And Jeff Phillips, son of Jim Phillips, in that interview mentions that, how that style of voice is gone, that repetition, that cadence that you had for so many years is missing. And it's sad because it was such a great, great time. Well, I talked about a quick turnaround and getting Danny Ford into the Ring of Honor. How about former Clemson track star Brianna Rollins and the job that she did over at the USA Championship? She ran a 12.26 in the 100-meter hurdles. That broke the American women's record set by Gail Devers back in 2000, which was a 12.33. And it didn't take me long to go ahead and figure out what she would have done if she had run in the Olympics. Well, to give it to you, Rollins ran a 12.26. The Olympic gold medalist was Sally Pearson of Australia. She ran a 12.35. Rollins was almost a complete, a tenth of a second faster. Almost a complete 900ths of a second faster, I guess. You start getting into that kind of track time, it gets a little weird. Trying to figure out exactly what it was. So 12.26 for Rollins, 12.35 won the gold medal at the most recent Olympics. Shout out to Brianna Rollins. Represent Clemson, because I'm telling you what, that's awesome. And I watched that thing. If she's not beating, She's not beating some also-ran. She's not beating me after a plate of nachos. I mean, she's beating girls who train, and she's beating them by a wide margin. I mean, what's a wide margin in a race like that? I mean, it's a pretty tremendous thing. And she, I think, actually knocked down a hurdle, or maybe a couple of hurdles along the way, which is even more impressive because that's got to affect you and your speed to some degree. Mythbusters does a lot of great things. I'd like to see them line up a couple of guys, one who actually hurdles the hurdles and the other one who actually runs over them, and see what the time difference is. Can you actually beat them? Can you run fast enough over them, flattening them, to keep up with a guy who's, I guess, actually hurdling them? I'm not sure. So, congratulations to her. Obviously, she's going to have a great career. I would imagine Rio could be her breakout moment for American track as far as people knowing her. And I don't know what color outfit she'll be wearing. I'm sure there's some wind resistant something or another, but I'm hoping, well, I guess the Olympics should be wearing red, white, and blue, but maybe along the way to get there, she can wear her Clemson colors proudly, because I can guarantee you Clemson Tiger fans are pretty proud of her. You don't hear a whole lot about track stars, and Clemson puts them out there, but it's not a topic we talk about. Sean Crawford and the job he did a few years back in the Olympics was very impressive, but she has an opportunity to win the gold medal. At FF_Reynolds on Twitter, speaking of walking across the Grand Canyon, says, there's two things I don't do. That's heights and spiders. I guarantee you, Elijah, there are a lot of people who don't do that. Well, did you hear the news about the Big 10 adopting a new tiered bowl process? And this is something that I think we've talked about in the past, and it's a move that maybe some people will like and others will not. But there becomes that issue where, as great as the bowl venues are, and then I use that term loosely, obviously, if you end up in Shreveport 4 years in a row, or if you end up at, for that matter, Atlanta over and over and over, it eventually gets a little bit old, a little bit stale. It's part of the reason that this system is still messed up. It's part of the reason that we need to just go ahead and shift away from the bowls and get to a strict 16-team playoff, because it makes for interesting games and travel for fans. And you might say, well, I don't want to have to travel 4 times to see Clemson play if they're the road team in a couple of matchups or in 3 matchups or whatever. Well, that's great. But what if you had to go to San Francisco 3 times in a row to go to the Kraft Fight Hungers Bowl or whatever? I mean, that's going to get old eventually too. And thus it makes the bowls less appealing. And I know they're getting a ton of their money not from you showing up and putting your rear end in a seat, but from you tuning in and watching those games. But the Big Ten has adopted this new selection process where they're going to actually look at that. And just because maybe outside of a BCS game, just because you finish second in the conference, you don't necessarily go to that second-tier bowl. They might rotate it up a little bit to keep some other teams in there. Now, the problem is, and many people will say this, if other conferences don't do that, the Big Ten could end up with some terrible matchups. And not terrible matchups in that they're not intriguing matchups, but matchups that are terrible from a competitive standpoint. Competitively for their conference. And it could end up that you get an Ohio State taking on if Ohio State had a bad year, taking on, say, a Vanderbilt in the Music City Bowl, whatever. I don't know exactly, what it could be, but, I mean, is that appealing, watching Ohio State throttle Vanderbilt? No. So it obviously doesn't fix it all. The biggest issue is still, though, you don't even need bowl games. And there are too many bowl games. And if everybody didn't have a bowl game, if bowl games were still special, every trip would mean something. They're not special anymore. What do we have, 68, 70 bowl games this past year, something ridiculous like that? Or is it 70 teams? I can't remember. Somebody, if you don't mind, if you're in the chat room, look it up. How many bowl games were there last year? I want to say maybe 68 teams with the bowls. Maybe 70. I mean, that's ridiculous. 70 teams, and we let teams go that have 500 records. 6-6 teams get in bowls. And occasionally, if there's a team on probation, a 5-7 team can go to a bowl. Come on, Mike. That can't be right. Brian, I agree. 6-6 teams should not be in a bowl. Georgia Tech says hello, says Mike Bentley in the chat room. Somebody during the break, please help me out. Do you like what the Big Ten's doing? Should the ACC go to a model like this? And in some ways it is like this, because a team like Clemson is probably going to get picked by the bowls sooner. Florida State's going to get picked by the bowls sooner because they bring folks to the games. It helps us out the way it's done now. This tiered system could end up, if the ACC were to adopt something like it, hurting Clemson because, well, the Atlantic Coast Conference could say, well, Clemson, you've been to Atlanta too much. Go to this next venue. I'm not sure I like it no matter what. Stay with us on TigerNet Talk.
The 1988 season was a great year for the Clemson Tigers, finishing 10-2 with a win over Oklahoma in the Citrus Bowl. But it was a better year for Clemson fans. That season, Tigertown Graphics became your source for custom tees, promotional items, and embroidery. Conveniently located in the heart of downtown Clemson, their retail store proudly displays Clemson shirts that are designed and printed directly on site. Whether you're looking for the latest Clemson t-shirts or ordering products for your school, organization, or business, Tigertown Graphics can help with all of your t-shirt needs. Find them online at www.tigertowngraphics.com. A Clemson tradition since 1988.
Blake Austin of South Carolina Farm Bureau is an insurance agent you can count on to meet all your needs. Home, auto, health, life, you name it, Blake's got you covered, and he can save you on your yearly rates. Call him now for a free quote, 803-259-5008. That's 803-259-5008. Or just go to ClemsonSportsTalk.com and click on the Farm Bureau logo to be connected to Blake. Do like I do and work with the best agent around, and you can tweet that. A winning team requires having great team members. If you're a landowner interested in selling timber or are considering buying or selling land, call the winning team of Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty, LLC today. Put the knowledge and skills of professional licensed foresters and realtors to work for your team. To learn more about services offered by Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty, LLC, visit www.crosscreektimber.com and easily follow the link to real estate or reach them by phone 864-517-3620 or 864-517-3621.
There's something about looking and feeling classy that everyone enjoys. Check out Edisto Outdoors, an apparel brand inspired by our southern animals and environment. These shirts feature soft-touch prints that will keep you looking your best in all types of weather. Look for Edisto Outdoors coming soon to many fine retailers across the state, or visit www.edistooutdoors.com. Technical, comfortable, livable.
This is Clemson Tom, and you're listening to Clemson Sports Talk. So sit down and have you a cold one and listen to a true American.
Driving down Clemson Boulevard.
Well, let me tell you what, we try to give away a Clemson Sports Talk show each and every week when we get an opportunity, and lots of people take part in the contest to get it. And what we typically do is we'll put out a tweet, and if you retweet that and you're already following us, that's good. If you don't follow us, go ahead and follow us and retweet it, and that'll give you an opportunity to win it. Anyway, at Bent0, and I see Mike Bentley in the chat room right now, said, you ever going to announce my winning of the Clemson Sports Talk shirt? Man, Mike, I wish I could, but I can tell you this. I think persistence pays off, as Josh Tetzlav will tell you. Josh, loyal listener to the show, emails, tweets to us. Josh is really, I'm telling you, he's retweeted every single time that we've put out the winner shirt. He's out in Spearfish, South Dakota. Josh actually won the shirt this week. So, Josh, congratulations to you. I know that he's a loyal listener, a big-time Clemson fan, and it was nice to be able to tell him that he had actually won that shirt. So, keep entering, take a shot. I know when we get on the air in Columbia on 560 AM, the team starting July the 15th, we'll have some giveaways and promotional stuff as well. We got to spread the word. We got to get it out there. Tiger Nation's got to rise up a little bit in Columbia. It's going to be an interesting run, that's for sure, especially to kick it off. I'm intrigued to see how it's received, because I think you guys know this from the perspective of being people who tune into the show. This show has never been an anti-Gamecock bashing type show. Now, I'll have my occasional rants, like we all do. And you know what I mean. I mean, every once in a while you got to get some of that off your chest. 4 years of losing to South Carolina in a row doesn't sit well when you've been used to beating them your entire life. So we'll see how it goes early and often. I may be the target of a number of right hooks from South Carolina Nation, but that's okay. We welcome it, and we look forward to being on in Columbia starting in mid-July. July 15th, that Monday, we'll kick off the show. But, Mike, yeah, man, thank you so much, brother, for the tweet and the email. Mike says, I hope the players are taking the preseason hype a lot better than I am. I'm decked out in something orange every single day. I'm thumping my chest like I'm some kind of SEC fan or something. Do you think the team is taking it better than I am, and how difficult do you think the Georgia opener will be? If we somehow, God forbid, lose that game, what effect do you think it will have on the rest of the season? Thanks again for the show. First off, I think that it's going to be an extremely difficult game from both sides. And part of that is when you talk about college football, there's no preseason. It's something Dabo Swinney's kind of stood up for and really wanted to see, an opportunity for some live games, you know, against some competition outside of yourself, spring games and scrimmages. It's not quite live action. And even in the circumstances that the NFL give you with preseason games, it's not that live, real football that you would typically see. So you've always got those early game jitters. You've got how high does Clemson come into that game juiced up. I mean, the last time Clemson and Georgia got together in Death Valley back in 2003, it's 30-0 Bulldogs. And nobody in their right mind walking in there thought Georgia would walk out whipping Clemson the way they did that day. Now, the odd thing about that season, and we brought it up here before, that season ends with Clemson beating South Carolina 63-17, beating a number 3 ranked Florida State team, beating a number 6 ranked Tennessee team, and you forget that was the 30-0 opening season game to Georgia. David Green, that for me is when you look back on that year, is a game that you've probably tried to store that as far back in your memories as possible. David Pollock as well was on that ball club. They absolutely smashed Clemson that year. So you got to have a little bit of that. This whole thing with the Rock occurring too, that's kind of got people fired up. We've seen the white truck. Is it a Georgia fan? Is it a Carolina fan? Is it somebody else? Is it a Clemson fan who's just out of their mind? Which I totally don't think that's the case. But you got that too. And that first time those guys were rubbing the rock, the damaged rock, the rock that someone tried to break. But you can't break the rock just like you can't break Clemson's spirit. And if Clemson loses that game, how do I think it'll affect the rest of the season? I'll be honest with you about that, Mike. I think when you look at this team and where we are compared to most of our competition, and the way Dabo Swinney has this team prepared each and every week to come out and play hard, even when there's a little bit of adversity, whether it's on the road in games at Boston College, the ability to bounce back, whether that's to climb back in it on the road at Maryland a couple of seasons ago with Sammy Watkins just having an unbelievable game. This team may not always come out like gangbusters, but they certainly have the ability to make up for mistakes early on in ball games. They've proven that fact. And I just look at the competition that we're going up against, and I'm not knocking any team we play. But let's be honest, and I think it's fair to say outside of Georgia, Florida State, and South Carolina, every other team on that schedule, Clemson should be able to fall behind and climb back in and win by 7, 10, 15 points. And if you don't, that's a disappointing loss. Losing to Georgia would be a difficult pill to swallow because the expectations of this season where we have them. Obviously, going on the road at NC State won't be a joke by any means, but then you get Florida State at home, huge game, and South Carolina at the end of the season. Outside of that, and maybe somebody might throw up a Georgia Tech because of the way they play that triple option offense that's given Clemson fits in the past. Those things might concern you a little bit. At least you get Georgia Tech at home again. But for me, I just think that this team's – they overcame so much in that LSU game. To come back from that adverse situation, you've got a senior leader in Taj Boyd who's proven time and time again that he deserves the recognition that Brock Heward did not give him this week of being a top 5 quarterback in college football. I thought it was an absolute joke, an absolute slap in the face. Taj Boyd is a top 3 quarterback in college football, possibly top 2 in my mind. I know there are going to be some people out there that say Johnny Manziel, and I'm not, the guy did win the Heisman Trophy. But if you had to tell me today, okay, Manziel's transferring to Clemson, who do you want starting? It's not even an option. I don't even entertain the offer. I've got my guy. And I don't know anybody. I'll tell you this. I guarantee you this. You can find more Texas A&M fans that would take Taj Boyd as their quarterback than you can find Clemson fans who would take Johnny Manziel. And I'll leave you with that thought through the week. Tweet to us. Who would you take? I don't care if you're one of the 12th men. If you're an Aggie, I've got cousins that were Aggies. There are enough Aggies out there that would take Taj Boyd more than there are Tigers who would take Manziel. That's a fact. And Brock Heward missed the boat when he didn't put Taj Boyd in the top 3, top 2. And for some of you, you might say he's number 1. And he may be. And he'll have a chance to prove it on the field. If Clemson goes into that South Carolina game where a lot of people hope they'll be, if they're undefeated, Taj Boyd has every right to that title as anybody going into that final game of the season. And that's a fact. We appreciate you being here. Don't forget, next week, no Wednesday show. It's the 4th of July. Go celebrate. It'll be the 3rd. That following Sunday, though, the 7th, we will kick off TigerNet Talk on Sundays. And don't miss Clemson Sports Talk coming to 560 a.m. The Team in Columbia, July 15th, 6 to 8 p.m. every night, Monday through Friday. Thank you so much for listening to TigerNet Talk, presented by Cross Creek Timber and Cross Creek Realty. Y'all take care now, and go Tigers!